update, and the team is still here, so I'll hand over to the Chairman. Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. There's a couple of minor issues covered in the paper which we'll be happy to take questions about later, but people are undoubtedly interested in where have we got to on uptake and water contracts, so I propose that we go straight to that, and without wanting to steal Andrew and the team's thunder here, I think I can say that we believe that we're in a position where we will have the support of other investors to reach financial close on the basis of the uptake levels that we've achieved. I'm going to hand over to Andrew now to talk you through a brief presentation, and we'll take questions afterwards.
Right, sorry, Leanne, can you pull the presentation up? Oh, right, hang on. So it's a matter of where it is. My technical abilities are limited, you should know that. Yeah, sure. I'm going to get a couple of other people to talk at a couple of points in this presentation. I note Duncan, well known to most of you around the table down the back there. I want Duncan to be part of the team presenting this. I'll sort of get you in for the cameo, Duncan, at the right time. And there are a number of farmers in the room, and in particular I'd note Jerry and Diana Greer, and towards the end of the presentation I'm going to ask Jerry to stand up. He probably come to the front here, Jerry, and just talk a wee bit about your own personal situation to the extent you're happy to do that, because I think it's important to turn the numbers in this presentation into a little bit of personal reality. Having heard a little bit of conjecture around the table about that from one or two councillors, so I think it might deal with that. Sorry, what's that? Oh, you'll get the chance to talk, no doubt, when you receive the report. Before I actually get into it, though, I should also note it's important here that we're not asking the council to. We're simply asking the council to receive this report. We're not asking the council to approve a CP. All right. So I'm going to talk about the position today, a bit of commentary around that position, in particular water volumes, number of contracts, land irrigate versus irrigable. That'll become clear shortly, and that's particularly relevant when we talk about whether ultimately 82% or sort of 97% of the water will ultimately be contracted, which has given rise to a bit of commentary as well today. Land use and economic impact I'm going to talk about. There's been a lot of conjecture around that and some fairly interesting statements from parties and in the media, but anyway, I'll talk about that dispassionately. I want to talk about the journey so far and the journey ahead. So as of today, these are the numbers we have. We have the numbers to proceed. We have 196 signed water use agreements, or confirmed, a small number of those, or confirmed being signed in writing to us. And I'm happy to elaborate on that shortly at 42.8 million cubic metres of water. We have a further 3 million cubic metres of water, 3 million cubic metres of water at an advanced stage of negotiation, and I'm going to elaborate on what that means without revealing the parties shortly. And finally, we have call options for water use agreements of 2.7 million cubic metres, and I'm going to elaborate on those, and I'll get Duncan to talk to some of this too as we go. But in aggregate, 48.5 million of water use agreement call option is in a very, very advanced state. More specifically, I guess, when the Regional Council looks to its own numbers, as Deloitte will do on your behalf when they peer review this, 42.8 million is cash flow positive. We've allowed a margin there. It's clearly in excess of the formal HBRC CP. We have a high level of confidence in closing out the agreement still in negotiation. We're also confident about the call options, and they require the contracting party to pay a substantial fee, which is at risk if they don't take up the water within a defined period of time. So in our view, between now and June, mid-June, a figure of 50 million cubic metres is realistic. Just to finish off that, deep water, and for the lay audience here, I'll define deep water for you. That's where a party enters into a water use agreement, converts out of their groundwater take And into stored water, that number is 8.4 million cubic metres of water. It's slightly less than what we'd built into the framework in the model. There is a clear environmental benefit to that, in that that water is no longer consumed, so therefore that water is left in the aquifer and ultimately will appear in the surface water flows. And that number, it's worth noting, is probably about 45% of the total water taken in the Ruataniwha consents in the 2012-2013 drought year. What I should dwell on momentarily is that it's pretty unequivocal that this is a significant lift in irrigation capacity in the basin and in the other parts of the irrigation zone, and it's a demonstration of where the community's at. Just on momentum, foundation water use agreements have risen from 161 to 196 in the last 3 weeks. Nothing like a deadline, and a real deadline. And in the process of sending out new agreements and receiving them back commenced on March 15, and for 95% completed between 18 and 22nd of April. So it's suffice to say that the Waipara office of the Regional Council had never seen quite so much activity on the 18th of April. It was a fair flurry in the door, and Duncan, I think you were down there, weren't you? So Duncan can attest to that as to how many people were flowing through the door. But the point is that I really want to dwell on this stat because it's been a huge workload. We completely reissued every water use agreement for every party on the 15th of March with a revised price and with some revision of the terms, the commercial terms. So that's a major transactional load for these parties to get through and for my team to get through. And I really want to acknowledge Duncan, David Todd, if you can wave your hand, Toddy, and Monique Thompson over here. Monique is the person who's been at the centre of the administrative and paper load of the process, haven't you, Monique? It's been fairly stressful at times, hasn't it? Say the least. But I really want to acknowledge the team's effort, and I want to acknowledge the farmers in the moment, and we'll get to that. Those still to complete are either very recently issued. For example, on the 18th of April, we issued 3 new water user agreements on the basis that parties over the weekend had made up their mind, well, something's going to happen here, so we better get in. And those agreements just going through their little process. They're not major amounts of water, but they are going through a process. And we obviously have 1 or 2 complex multi-party agreements. And a case in point there is that we have a board minute in one of those cases where the board signed off the water user agreement. We've just got to get the water user agreement back in the office. And I'll just add, there's a couple of water use agreements that require trustee signatures. For example, we have some water use agreements that might have 5 trustees requiring to sign the agreement. Some of those trustees, and in one particular case I can think of right now, as I speak, is located in Saudi Arabia. So the water user agreement's actually got to get through a bit of a process around and go offshore. But more importantly than all of that process stuff is that the Central Hawke's Bay farming community has unequivocally demonstrated its commitment to and a desire to see the RWSS proceed. Unequivocally. All right? I don't think anybody can doubt that from these stats. The second point I want to make here is that the momentum achieved over the past few weeks is now resulting in substantive external parties firmly indicating their intention to enter the area, and that will be reflected in contracts. Okay, so it's exactly as we thought would play out. The increased momentum, the closer this deal gets to reality, the more we see the commitment being made, and I guess that's a really important point here. Just a wee bit of stats here. The area of, in fact, I might get you, Duncan, are you happy to whip up and talk to these ones, actually, I think? I'd really like you to talk to these because Duncan and his team are the custodian of a very major database that looks at irrigable land, where the irrigation's going, to land use stats, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's appropriate you talk to that, Duncan, if you have to. Okay.
Afternoon. So I think I've talked about previously to the council that some water users have been conservative in a couple of respects. They've irrigated parts of their farm as opposed to every corner of their farm that could be irrigated, and they've also taken slightly lower volumes per hectare than what I guess technical advice would suggest is required. So the 15,000 hectares up there, that reflects the amount of land that's been irrigated out of the volumes that have been shown in the presentation so far. The second point, though, is if those same farms, the same 196 properties, actually irrigated all of the area they could at the volume per hectare that I guess science suggests they should, then that would account for 85% of the total volume available being sold. So it's not new properties we have to find necessarily to get the rest of the water sold. We still need some of that, but some of our existing customers have the opportunity to take a very large percentage of the total volume of water that's available to us. So I think that's worth noting. We still obviously need it to happen, but they've already made the decision to invest. And I guess that follows on to the commentary point there, which is some of the larger properties. So the 196 is about farms. So just to remind you, that's farms, not farmers. And the very largest of those will have more than one connection point, but it's a reasonable indication for the number of connection points we're looking to have. And if I can't put a map up of where the properties are that have agreed to take water, because I'd be disclosing sort of a whole lot of private information by doing that, but it is a reasonably spread sort of a geographic area. So there's a few gaps. Obviously not every farm that could irrigate is irrigating, but the ones that are cover a pretty broad area of our command zones. So that's takes a delicate touch. So this is a split of the land use. So this is post-irrigation land use. So we've tried to capture that information as we've gone. To be fair, most people aren't making dramatic changes in land use at this stage. It's sort of about positions of safety. For instance, you'll see the largest single land use in there is mixed arable, and so that's a combination of arable and some sort of livestock farming. So that's almost half of the water. So that's by volume, that particular graph. So that's by irrigation amount. And red meat at 18%. So dairy in there at 22%. Interestingly, only one property is looking to convert to dairy so far. So it's sort of existing dairy properties that are either irrigated and need more water or better security around water that are looking to contract with the scheme, or it's dryland dairy farms that are looking to include some irrigation into their farm system, and a small amount, a modest amount of trees and vines in there as well. Not huge water users probably compared to the pastoral systems, to be fair. So this is a split based on the actual properties. So you'll notice trees and vines there, it's gone up quite a bit because, again, it's not a big water user on a per hectare basis compared to something like the pastoral farming systems. But 6% of the 196 FMIs are looking at pip fruit and viticulture. The rest of the numbers are pretty steady. So dairy's down to 11% there, and you'll notice that difference, and that's purely because dairy as pastoral irrigation uses more water per hectare, so that's the reason for the two differences in the graphs there. But quite simply, I guess, as expected, at this stage, most of the land use is going to sort of a red meat and arable type combination, with a total there being sort of 70% of the properties staying in those land uses. So I think I've probably covered that a little bit, but we have had inquiries from pip fruit and viticulture down in the area. I think the sentiment remains that a preferred address for those land uses is still the Heretaunga Plains, but the theme that is flowing through from the people that are having discussions with us is that the Heretaunga Plains is going to get full at some stage, and so heading to Central Hawke's Bay might be a little better than heading to other parts of the country, and so I think that's where the opportunity exists. There's obviously some existing pip fruit, and I think 5 vineyards down there already, so not huge vineyards, but there is, some people already using those land uses in Central Hawke's Bay. And I guess, those particular land uses are quite capital intensive on a per hectare basis, which won't be news to anyone sitting around this table. So they'd be great additions to have as water users. There's no doubt about that. But I sort of think that the diversification we've got in those land uses is also pretty helpful from a community perspective as well. So it's not all about one industry. It's the blend of industries that we expected it would be. Fair to say there's not going to be a lot of additional dairy conversion going on just while dairy's in this current stage of the commodity cycle. But we would expect, as long as that recovers, in time there will be some dairy expansion in Central Hawke's Bay, but it was never expected to be a single dominant land use in that area.
You explain your process then, I'm sure.
Yeah, I just, I'm happy to answer questions whenever it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, but I guess I'd just like to restate some things that Andrew mentioned. I mean, to have, Monique generated just under 11,000 pages of paperwork that was sent out to 196 property owners, and within a month we've had, just about all of that paper executed and returned back to us. And I think that's a phenomenal result from the farming community. It's an incredible response, and it was absolutely needed. Fair to say, if we were designing this process from the start, we wouldn't be introducing changes to the contract within a month of our closing date. That wouldn't be considered the best way to go about it. But at the end of the day, we've dealt with the hand we were given, and the farming community has certainly stood up and responded to that emphatically. And I suppose that was in a publication, I think, but it just talks about, not everyone who thought about becoming a water user has become one. There's over 200 properties that are no for now, and they might be no forever if the land stays in that particular owner's hands for a long, long time. But typically you would expect to see some land ownership change occur once irrigation comes to a community, and so the next owner might well be interested in irrigating, or the next generation might, when they get to sort of make some decisions on the property. So I guess that was a tree that sort of talked about or tried to show the process that someone goes through in deciding to irrigate or not, because that is a potential outcome. And I might get Jerry to come and grab a microphone, which isn't something he does every day, so I'm sure he's a little bit pensive, but.
Have my seat, Jerry.
So just so we're sure, Duncan, how many farmers are planting those things?
Trees.
Those decision trees.
Quite a few.
Thanks all. My name's Jeremy Greer. My wife and I, a family, are farming in Central Hawke's Bay and have a dairy farm in Southern Hawke's Bay. I'd just like to make it quite clear that we're running a beef operation in Central Hawke's Bay that's all finished cattle on our farm. We do struggle from year to year with dry summers and particularly dry autumns, and this year is no exception. We are getting very dry again. We've got probably 200 hectares out in crops and new grass that is not quite ready for grazing. Had we had irrigation, the cattle would have been on these crops and grass 2 months ago. We have contracts on cattle with, we produce bull beef, prime steers, and also high-end Wagyu, which we are tied to supplying at certain times of the year. So we need surety of crops to make sure these cattle are finished. I'll take you through the process of where we've gone in deciding that we want water. Probably 10 years ago we tried to get water, but as we all know, there was a moratorium put on water rights. So we've farmed one side of Mr. Apple and the other side on an intensive onion operation, so we know what water can do. has been quite frustrating over the years farming between these properties, seeing what they can do and what we can't. No one likes seeing starving cattle or hungry cattle. I'm a relatively young farmer, been farmed for 20 odd years. I'm passionate about farming. The decision to take water was not an easy one, but it was perhaps a little bit easier for our operation because we've got family involved. So a succession plan is in place, and it's made a lot easier to know what you're going to do with the water further down the track, and it just gives us surety of knowing that land's going to be looked after in years to come. So I didn't want my grandchildren to say, what the hell did he do? So I'm very proud to have signed up to 3 contracts for 3 different properties. So the other one I'd like to make just a general talk about is crops. We have the opportunity, we have cash cropped in the past, but the families, particularly my son and I, are passionate about growing cattle. We've started to grow fodder beet to get us through these dry autumns and particularly get us through the winter. This particular year, we've grown fodder beet in Norsewood on our dairy farm. Norsewood, as you know, has got a very, very good sound water rainfall. We have crops over there that are measured the other day, nearing 35 tonnes to the hectare. We at home have got fodder beet waiting for rain that would be, some of it struggling 10 to 15 tonne a hectare. So that just gives you an idea of what water can do for us. We want to grow our business. Water is another tool to our business to grow the business and produce more beef out the gate. So I'm happy for anyone to ask anything, but that's fine. Thank you. Can I sit down?
Thank you.
I'd like to
sit.
Just stay here for a second, Jerry. Thanks very much.
That's right.
Chairman, just before we turn to questions, because I think we're about ready to do questions, I just wanted to go back to what I said at the outset, which is that we're very confident that we can get to financial close with our co-investors on the basis of these numbers. Why do I say that? It's because, as Andrew pointed out in one of his slides, that at 42.8 million cubic metres of the local contracts and confirmed contracts alone, that's sufficient water for the scheme to be cash positive in its first year. The 40 million number that is in the council's official CP, if you like, from a couple of years ago, was a proxy for that number. That's how it was derived to get the scheme to be cash positive in its first year. More recently, in our discussions with other investors, we've set a number that looks more like 45, but it depends on the mix of new water supplied by the scheme and deep groundwater. Given the mix that we currently have, it is an absolute coincidence, but we have checked it, that at 42.8 million cubic metres we are cash positive, and that will be the threshold that our co-investors will be most anxious that we get over. Everything more over and above that is good news for the scheme. It's good news for all of the parties in the scheme, particularly if we can get, as Andrew said, to 50 million cubic metres. At 50 million cubic metres, only another 1.5 on top of everything, if we manage to convert everything now. Farmers get another discount, and investors do better because we're starting from a higher up point on the uptake, and we have higher cash flows for all of the parties in every year.
Thank you for confirming that, Dr. Pearce. I mean, as recently as this morning, I still continue to hear what appears to be misinformed confusion from the state radio broadcaster, so thank you for clarifying that. Okay, any questions? Councillor Hewitt, do you have any questions? No? Sorry, I thought you did. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not quite sure who wants to answer. There's a couple of questions. Firstly, of the 196 contracts that you've currently got signed, you talked about an optimisation process with the distribution system. Are all 196 able to be supplied?
Yes. That's correct. The 196 are part of the distribution network supplied. That's basically the instruction with the contractor, and that was their writing mandate. So they're all supplied. Yep.
And my second question, are any of the 196 contracts you've got not attached to land at this point in time?
What I would say, without revealing parties, in the 3 million cubic metres of external interest that's coming in, that's not necessarily in every instance attached to land.
Thank you. Councillor Balfour.
Yes, a few questions. So we're still at a place where 200 decision makers have said no, and your growth scenario to us is that by existing contractors sizing up their situations over time, they will progressively take more uptake. So it sounds like what you're saying is your larger prospect of growth is from this first wave of irrigators taking more as opposed to penetrating the market more, so to speak. Is that accurate?
Yep, that's certainly part of it, and that's on advice from quite a few people, including McFarlane Rural Business. So once someone's put the infrastructure in place, you're not going to want to sit there without the appropriate amount of water to get the job done being secured. So that deals with the per hectare volume that I sort of talked about as being part of the balance. And also there's the additional hectares part. So at the moment it's all a little bit new. So Jeremy, for instance, has never irrigated before, and I think I'll be probably saying what you could have said, but that family's not looking to irrigate as much of their property as they could. But it's his intention, I think. Well, Jerry, do you want to talk about that? Because I shouldn't probably say what.
We're only looking at irrigating up to 20% of our operation at the moment. And like any new business, you go in to see how it goes. And I would say that our intention will be to take more water once we get up and running, get the infrastructure.
Yeah, and that's a common theme. So it's not pure speculation. It's based on what the farmers that are contracting with us are saying they're likely to do in the future.
What is the difference between the 42.8 being cash flow positive on day one and the higher numbers that we've seen, 64, 65%, which is where the cash flow scenario goes at the point of the dam turning on?
In terms of the uptake forecasting and the uptake curves, which you'll remember were presented to you and received in September of 2015, we indicated in that process that we expect that there'll be a combination of as the pipes go past the gate, there'll be an increased interest from some of those properties that might not be on the pipe, but they're in the infill space. Right. So that's reasonable to expect that some of that increased uptake will come from those sources. And I think it'll be fair to say that that we expect to see some level of turnover in the ownership and tenure of some of those blocks that even might be sitting in this pipeline right now. So there'll be quite a dynamic situation. So I guess that's where the uptake's coming from. It's a combination of people taking more water, combination of tenure change, land ownership change through that period, and some infill. And that's where I guess that going back to the previous item, there was speculation as to what's the cash flow level under various scenarios and what does it mean for your dividends, etc. That's where we've had a whole lot of work done and a whole lot of peer review work done. What I would say too is actually based on the behaviour that Duncan and I are seeing from a number of parties, we expect interestingly that the spot water number contracted will be quite high.
So just to follow up to that, the increase from the 42, 43 to the 65, which is the baseline that we've seen in all the earlier cash flow projections, that's a 50% increase basically, which...
Well, let's be clear. Perhaps I might recalibrate for you a wee bit. We think it's not unreasonable to be sitting at 48 to 50 million cubic metres of water in the next few months, right?
Okay.
And that will be driven in part by externals entering. So is a gap of another 10 to 14 million cubic metres a lot? I don't believe it is, personally. Our hardest sale in this deal right now is selling a scheme that has always been does it or doesn't go, with a whole lot of political pressure around it and media commentary. Our hardest sale in this scheme is right now because there is not a pipe going past the gate, there is not water flowing, so therefore for people like Jerry, they're buying into a proposition. I don't believe it's anywhere near as hard a sale once you have it up and running, and history is evidence of that elsewhere.
So, may I continue, Mr. Chairman? So it would be appropriate for us, now this is maybe to our team, to expect from Deloitte to see some scenario where perhaps that gap wasn't filled as rapidly as you're presuming it will be. The gap from now 50, you say, to 65, let's say, in 3 years. What the criticality of that is that a non-issue?
Not our issue.
Well, I think that's entirely up to your advisors as to whether or not they consider anything beyond the base case. The downside case is lower uptake than that between close and first water. If they want to choose to analyse some other less advantageous cases, then I guess they'll do that and use that as part of their advice to you.
So just the last question then. The other report we received and had some disagreement about recently was the Butcher report, which made a pretty big deal about orcharding and vineyards. If I understand what your slide earlier on about the land use, it was 2%, I think, was vines and pip fruit. Was that correct?
Yeah, that's by water volume, or 6% by properties.
By hectares, what is it? That's 6% by hectares?
No, sorry.
Or is it
That's the
2%?
only one I haven't got up there, Councillor Belford, I'm afraid. I could provide you that number, but I've only split it out by FMI, by property, and by volume.
Whether it's 2 or 6, which are the only two numbers we've seen,
Yes.
if there's 16,000 roughly hectares irrigated, the point is it's a substantially lesser amount than was used a few weeks ago to justify the economic viability of the overall scheme. So it would also seem like we deserve some fresh analysis of what those benefits might be given these land uses. Is that?
Well, actually, it wasn't just permanent horticulture that was used to justify the economic viability of the scheme. We should be very clear about that. And if you had read that report, you would note that there were several scenarios, sensitivity scenarios around the land use volume in permanent horticulture, considerably less than the case that Butch presented in the main body of the report. And the scheme was still economically viable under those lesser scenarios. So I want to correct that for a start. The second point, and more fundamental point, is that if you look at existing landowners, and this is reflected in Duncan's comment earlier, is that the existing landowners, when they first irrigate, do what they know how to do. So land use change evolves over time, and we would expect, it's not unreasonable, that there'll be a change in types of, whether it's horticulture, permanent horticulture, arable systems, crops, there will be change over time. And I finally note, as Jeff Butcher noted in his presentation to you, that trees and vines were used as a proxy for permanent horticulture. There are many other forms. And to illustrate that point, one of the parties looking at entering this scheme in our numbers produces extremely high value crops. and horticultural crops.
Yeah, I think the point here is that the 4,000 hectares were based on vineyards and orchards, and that's no, it wasn't as a proxy. That's what the numbers were used for, the profitability per hectare and for the labour. So it wasn't a proxy for anything other than what it was.
So I think, though, if there was a lesser amount of those two industries, the total cost, the spend on farm would reduce considerably, as would the jobs and perhaps the GDP output. So I guess it can't, much was made in some quarters about the increased on-farm spend required, and yet very little was made about the extra jobs that spend related to, or the extra GDP that spend related to. So we can't cherry pick the pieces we like
You can't have it both
and
ways.
the pieces we dislike.
Chairman, I think it's also probably reasonable to point out that Butcher's report wasn't attempting to address... sorry? It wasn't attempting to address what the situation would be on day one of the scheme. It was attempting to address what the land use would look like over a rather longer period of the life of the scheme. So it's a spurious comparison to say, well, what numbers did he have in the course of that compared to the numbers that are here for when the scheme on day one is only half occupied?
Mr. Mohi.
Yes, just a preamble, please don't laugh at my question, but is it possible to over-allocate water from the dam?
Yes, in simple terms, it would be possible to over-allocate water from the dam, and what that would do is compromise reliability. So the underlying point there is that we've forecast, in effect, I think including urban water for CHB, 105 million cubic metres at a level of reliability, and that's key, because if the scheme's silly enough to go away and sell a whole lot more over and above that without the reliability, it's going to compromise its customer base.
So again, the concession deed deals with that situation. It sets an upper bound of how much contracted water can be sold, which is the 105 million cubic metres. And the concession deed also sets rules for and priorities of who gets supplied first if there is a shortfall due to a dry year, and so on and so forth.
Mr. Robinson. Sitting quietly in the corner there. You,
Well, Chairman, I haven't
Good
got a question
afternoon.
or even. I mean, I just this is an important day, so I just wouldn't mind making a couple of comments if I could. And the first is that, of course, the numbers speak for themselves. And the second is that it's been done before, but I personally want to applaud the resolve of the Central Hawke's Bay farmers in signing up in the amounts they have. It's been a pretty tough gig down there. There's been a fair bit of baiting, a fair bit of name calling, a fair bit of general derision about the farmers not stepping up to the plate, but as has been noted, over a period of 2 weeks they've done that, and I want to acknowledge the as I say, the resolve. I also want to thank the leadership of the Farmer Reference Group, of which Cherry is one. There's been 7 or 8 or a dozen farmers that have met consistently in that lovely hall in Waipawa, not the hall, the office, the Regional Council office down there, which mostly is not a hive of activity, as it was in the last fortnight, but I think the leadership they've shown has been great. I also want to acknowledge the leadership and work of our sales staff, 2 of them here, David and Duncan, but also another David and Stu. Andrew, well done to you for whipping everyone along, making you proud of yourself at times, but someone had to. And also the support staff. Monique has been mentioned, but also dear old Di has put up with a fair bit. So I want to acknowledge that. And lastly, probably everyone will forget about them, are the CHB professionals. As someone said, 11,000 sheets of paper have gone across people's tables. They've had to be signed, countersigned, witnessed, and what have you. They've done a lot of work. So this is the final leg in a 4-legged stool. We've had the promoter, which is HBRIC, on behalf of the Regional Council. We've had the investors, of which HBRIC will be one. We've got the constructor, and finally we've now got a customer base. Without a customer base, you haven't got a business. We've got that, and that's fantastic. And the customer base is going to be the oil which is going to get this machine cranking. So I just want to acknowledge the leadership and the resolve that they've shown. And finally, Chairman, I've just got to hope and pray that we'll get a bit more balance from the media from now on.
No, wouldn't that be nice? Chair. No, Councillor Hewitt's next.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Sam. I've got a speech written and you've about nailed it. I will. He's got me word for word. I do have a question, or two actually. Andrew, can you just tease out call option agreements and exactly what they mean? And also, we've got the figure for the water uptake, but what does that translate to in hectares at this point in time?
Two questions there. Why don't you explain the call option, Duncan? I'll deal with the second leg if it's still.
Yep. So the call option is a lot like any other option, financial option you might be offered. It involves the right to a foundation water user agreement, but not the obligation to actually enter into one. So much like a currency option, and to secure the option, you have to pay a fee, which is non-refundable. So I guess. The fee's quite significant, so 2.7 million cubes up there. I think it's about $600,000 that we'll be getting paid at financial close. And if the parties involved never call that option, so never want to become a water user for that 2.7 million cubes of water, then the RWLP keeps that money. So they lose it, it's at risk. If they convert, or the sooner they call the option, so the sooner they transfer from it being an option to being a fully fledged water user, the more of that fee they get refunded back to them. So there's a genuine cost in there. It's much better than someone saying I might take some more water one day. They actually have to put a payment across, which is So worst case we get some money. The best case we get 2.7 million cubes of extra contracted water.
And just the land area.
I think it was 15,700.
15,000. Sorry, I did have it on this presentation. Yeah, there you go. On the basis of that uptake, we would note that's a large irrigated area. I think off the top of my head, the Heratonga Plains irrigated area is about 22 to 24,000 hectares. So 15,000, close on 16,000 hectares is a large irrigated area. And if Duncan was to, we can't show you the map because it's private information, but that covers a very big part of the irrigable land in Central Hawke's Bay in terms of the parties signing up. I'll just go back to a point that Duncan's made. Is that people are hedging, so that they're contracting less water than is optimal in a productivity sense. So in time you might see, if ultimately they contract at a better level of productivity or reliability in their water, that area may stay the same, but the volume of water may be slightly higher, Duncan. Would be a trend.
Yeah, so just to clarify, the 15,700 hectares isn't the amount of the farms, it's just purely the irrigated area across those 196 properties.
And if I can finally note, we're still expecting to see around about 27,000 hectares irrigated ultimately.
Councillor Graham.
Well, Chair,
Bit of stare-shut going on here.
Sam's been waiting a long time for me to agree, and I've got to agree to part of what he said today. Despite all the politics and despite all the supposition from some of these dreadful reports that we've seen, the bottom line is that it started at 40%. We voted by a democratic vote. We got over 40%. And that was the cash flow. There was a lot of argument on whether it was 40%. It moved to 45, 47, but you're now saying it's 45. I have to agree with that. I think, and you got 46. That was your KPI to get over this condition precedent, and you've done it. And it's been
it's incorrect. It's 40. 40 is the condition precedent.
No. But we always knew that to get it was condition precedent.
Financial close.
Getting the condition precedent was based around positive cash flows, and so we knew that went up. So it's 46%. You've done it, and you've done it, and I'm just hoping that it's genuine and that these guys behind it, they're going to put their money where their mouth is and they're going to pay. And so you've achieved that condition precedent, and I've got to give you credit for that. And even though I didn't vote for that originally, That's a democratic process. You've done it, and that's it. Now you just got one more to get through. And that's the investor.
Thanks, Councillor
Profound
Graham. And when
question.
we come to you with the final proposition, I'm picking this number. This number is going to be even bigger.
Councillor Belford, very patient there.
Yeah, just a minor, the 2.7, just to follow up to Debbie's question, the 2.7 in options, do those need to be exercised to be counted against the 50 that would trigger the rate reduction?
Yes, is the answer.
Okay, enough about uptake. Any final questions? Well, we haven't gone through the rest of the report yet, have we? There's still spending some money and stuff, and one more slide, okay.
Yeah, which is an obvious one. Which is pretty obvious. so we'll just go through to it, so it'll be complete. Sorry, hang on. This thing is so sensitive, sorry. Right.
No, it was on it.
Next,
There we go. So clearly we're in a negotiation phase with institutional investors, Crown Irrigation. I'll talk about that a wee bit in a minute in relation to what's in the report. We've got to get through a key decision by the Regional Council, and that decision's about all of the conditions precedent, so we're not asking for that today. We've got the land swap Court of Appeal issue, which is being heard on the 26th of May, so that's an issue sitting there that we've got to work our way through. But ultimately, the key is that there will be a construction phase. So there's a bit of work to do. We are in the process of we're well and truly in the middle of all of that right now, and I guess that it's fair to say, Chairman, on the board's got the whip out in terms of my team, the financing team, to complete the rest of those tasks, and in particular the financing CP. So that's where our focus is moving to. So that just rounds out that particular presentation. Andy, maybe I can just comment quickly on the. Is there anything else I need to say on the report itself?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. All right.
So no questions about the rest of the report? I have a question in relation to Mr. Newman, actually. There must be fast becoming a time, Dr. Pearce, that we get our Chief Executive back. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Thank you, I think. You and I and Andrew have had a number of conversations since the beginning of this year about what might be an appropriate time for him to come back to the council. I think we're substantively beyond this condition precedent now, and so this was the hardest, without wanting to minimise in any way at all the amount of time and effort and the number of things that have to be done between now and bringing you the final decision. A lot of that is more machinery. I think the best response that I could give you is to say that next week you and I and he probably need to sit down together and map out a plan of when you can have him back. It won't be next Monday. It will be, sometime after that, obviously. But no, it won't be Tuesday either. But it'll. But we'll make it as soon as makes sense from both sides. I'm very aware of the fact that we've had him over on our side of the table, so to speak, for much longer than was originally intended, and it will be good for everybody in many ways for Andrew to go back to his real job, I think. Yeah.
Just fly the flag. Okay, any other questions in regard to the paper and general costings, financing? Councillor Hewitt indicated you wished to move that we accept this report. Receive and take note of the HBRIC Ltd April 16 updates. You happy to move that? Is someone happy to second that? Councillor Dick, thank you. Wish to speak?
Thanks, Chair. As we bring together the elements of this multi-million-dollar project, today is the day that the Central Hawke's Bay community has spoken. It gives me great pride to move this recommendation that we receive and take note of the report. And as has been mentioned during the discussion, I'd like to also pay tribute to a number of people, namely the Central Hawke's Bay community, and we have a great representation sitting here behind us. I think in terms of stepping up to a genuine business model and a genuine client customer base, the support that they've shown for this project, particularly over not just the last month, but in particular the last month, but over the last several years, has been absolutely phenomenal. There's been much debate and frustration with the media, and most of these people haven't had the opportunity to have any comeback on that, other than actually put their ink to the paper and turn up here today. So in terms of the community having spoken, there's a number of people who also need acknowledgement. There's been a farmer reference group that's been in place for a number of years, and those farmers have worked tirelessly in order to support the project and support the other farming community members who have been looking at coming on board with the project. It's been a huge decision for farming families in Central Hawke's Bay. This is a 35-year project at this stage, so it's an intergenerational decision and investment opportunity, and no individual member of the community has taken this decision lightly. In terms of what Plan Change 6 has presented with challenges to the farming community, we've been faced with huge economic downturn with the implications of Plan Change 6, and should Ruataniwha not go ahead, that economic downturn will ripple hugely through the whole of the Hawke's Bay community, including through to our port. So I'd like to commend the leadership that the Regional Council and then latterly the investment company has shown by taking the bull by the horns and looking for some farming resilience in terms of providing water security for the Central Hawke's Bay community. If we look at what this project going ahead can do for the wider community, we have increased benefits going through the port to the tune of, if we take the butcher report that's been presented to us, another $2.5 million per annum in revenue. So the benefits and the multiplier effect of processes and economic improvement throughout the community, on-farm employment and off-farm employment and regional GDP, the benefits to this whole community will just flow from the source to the sea, and all of those within the community will benefit from it. Once again, sincere thanks to you guys at the end of the table. It's been a long, long journey, and Andrew, to your team, I know you've all taken some flack, and it's a tremendous milestone here today, so I really commend you for where you've got. No one would have really foreseen that you had to do the amount of work you had to do in the last 5 minutes, but yeah, the community's spoken, and what a great job you've done. Thank you.
Councillor Dick. With your microphone on, you would, wouldn't you? Yeah.
I'd just like to congratulate the HBRIC board on sterling effort and a good achievement in a situation of probably unprecedented controversy, which means that it's a very difficult environment to do things in. So you've coped with all that, you've shown real stamina, and you've produced results, and so I believe you deserve credit.
Thank you. Mr. Mohi.
Yes, I represent the Nine Marae in the Tamatea Taiwhenua, and we, amongst our numbers, have a few that were a little bit concerned about the effects of this dam on the environment. But generally speaking, a huge majority are well behind it, and we look forward to being involved in the work streams that come off it, and also look forward to welcoming many of our people that have actually gone Australia to find work, and now there's a prospect of ongoing work on their homeland. And congratulations to the whole team, not only the four there, but the farming community behind you that has supported this. Thank you.
Mr Chairman, I wish to speak in favour of the motion, which is a very mild receiver report. But I think today is a day when we've actually crossed a very important milestone, and I'd like to go back a bit and look at some previous directions from HBRIC on this, saying it'll be the last bit of ink that will dry on the page to get the sign up. Well, you've actually done it before, the last bit of ink, and so I really congratulate you on being where you are now. And you have a client base, and that's what the reality of this dam is about, is having a client base, because without that there would be no dam. So it hasn't been an easy step for these particular farmers. It's a big sum of money for them to consider, and I would like both to acknowledge the work that they've put into it, but and as well the Farmers Reference Group, who have been pretty hard-working throughout this time and very loyal to this scheme and their understanding of what it can bring the local area. I do want to refer to the fact that, you know, there's a lot of publicity around this is for Central Hawke's Bay. This is for the whole of Hawke's Bay. And there's no doubt about it that the people in Napier are going to benefit too. We're going to see the benefits through the port. We're going to see the benefits through the ability to grow small businesses around some of these things. There's opportunity here, and this opportunity is for the whole of Hawke's Bay. And I think that clearly we've got to see the wider benefits. It's not just Central Hawke's Bay, it's all of us who can benefit from the economic development that this may bring. So we're not there yet. We're not there until we've finally approved the business case and everything else, but this is certainly indicating that we're a very big step nearer, and I do hope that we get a change around in some of the information that is being given by the press, and particularly Radio New Zealand, who seem not to understand a bit of this. I do want to refer to the Butcher report, because we were able to question that with the author, and he was questioned about that horticulture and viticulture, and said quite plainly when asked about things like seed production that it was a proxy, and that yes, there were other permanent crops that actually fitted in there that it wasn't just pip fruit and wine. So I would, having just corrected that one, would like to just round up by saying that this is a very positive day for us and something to celebrate.
Councillor Pike.
Yeah, I'd like to speak. As Councillor Scott said, you know, we've still got a few steps to go before the big start button on this one is actually pressed. But today we've received two reports that I think are fantastic news, great news, the dividends, and of course this report showing the water uptake. So I want to congratulate you, Andy, and the board, and particularly the workers out there, the guys, your team, who have been working with the farmers, Jeremy and all the farmers here. The story, thank you for your story, Jeremy, because I think those are the things that need to be really highlighted. What is actually happening at the coalface, the reasoning, the thought processes that these farmers are actually having to go through. It's a tough decision, and as was mentioned, you know, it's a 35-year decision on the part of a minimum 35-year decision that these farmers are having to make. So I think this is fantastic news today. We've still got a little way to go. I think that one of the things that's been raised about this is the fact that Plan Change 6 and this dam are inextricably linked to the economic impact, the economic development of our region, and that's going to become even more obvious, I think, as time goes by. I just want to echo what Sam was saying about the press, and I think I've been pretty disappointed with the reporting. It seems to be all negative, you know, glass half full all the time. So those naysayers who are out there are going to have to rethink a little bit and look at some of the information that's coming through here. And I just want to say that this is a good day for the Regional Council, a good day for Hawke's Bay.
Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, this has been an incredibly controversial project, as we all know. And I've been a critic of it. on numerous occasions, and I've always said to the directors of HBRIC, this will come down to whether a few hundred farmers in Central Hawke's Bay are prepared to sign on the dotted line. They've demonstrated that they're prepared to do that, so I congratulate all of you on your efforts in getting this project over. It's probably its most difficult hurdle. As Councillor Pipe says, there's still some steps to be taken, and I wish you luck with those steps, and well done for your sterling efforts to get the project to this point.
Councillor Belford.
I continue to have pretty significant doubts about both the environmental and economic benefits of this scheme. I also have a great deal of concern about any number of aspects of the process itself that's been followed. What I have the most respect for is the decision that 196 farmers have made for themselves and their lives and their businesses. I can't take any exception with that at all. That's an important, very important element in the whole mix of making a judgment about this scheme. I'm not prepared yet to attend the coronation. There are steps to go through here yet, legal and otherwise. And as I said, I continue to have pretty substantial disagreements with a fair number of the underlying assumptions. But to those of you who have looked at it, individually, case by case, hats off to you for doing that and putting yourselves behind it. I take my hat off to that.
I get a second
Go
go.
on, have a go.
I get a second go at this. I guess I'm totally in Councillor Belford's position here. I thought that's a very good dissertation he just made, and that exactly amplifies my view. It shows a lot of courage to these farmers that they have signed up. As Sam said, the bottom line is that's created the customer base. But I think, and I still have lots of problems and issues with the project, but as I said before, we agreed by democratic vote that a certain KPI was X, and as far as I'm concerned, this KPI has been achieved. So it's a condition precedent which has been achieved despite all, and a few more hurdles to go. And we'll just see how that all pans out.
Just to sum up. There's another meeting I'll speak at. Next one.
Okay. This is a really exciting day, and as I said before, today the community has spoken. So as we've heard, the farming community sent an unequivocal demonstrament to its commitment and desire to see Ruataniwha proceed. And look, our community's, it's just set to boom, the whole community. As we get reliable water, there will be a catalyst for change in terms of confidence to invest and innovate within the farming community and throughout the wider community. It's important to note that there are other reasons why we're doing this: to improve the quality and quantity of the water flowing down through the Tuki River, to provide the rural community with a secure irrigation source, and to give our region the lift it needs to hold its own in rural New Zealand. So once again, hats off to the Central Hawke's Bay farming community who've put their endorsement onto this project today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And the contrary, no. Motion is carried. Thank you. And right, we've got a few other bits.
No.
Yeah, division. It was division. Yeah, 100%. Look, I'm while these guys are here, would like to deal with the public excluded item. So if I could prevail on you to, as we head into public excluded, while we've got the team here, just to deal with this last HBRIC item. So is someone happy to move us into public excluded and invite, and you're seconding that? Yeah. So invite the HBRIC team to remain. We'll name them. We'll come back to it because we're still waiting for the lawyer to come. He'll be here shortly. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Thank you, everyone.